Hey guys, welcome to the channel. Today's video we are changing the pads and rotors on a 2011 Jeep Compass. This procedure is identical for the Jeep Patriot and also the Dodge Caliper. All those suspension and braking systems are the same in all three of those Chrysler vehicles. And yeah, it's pretty straightforward. We're going to change the rotors because basically when we're braking at medium to high speed, we get a pretty violent wobble in the steering wheel, and I'm sure you've heard that, but it's like a warped rotor will give you those symptoms. So the kit that I bought off Amazon, and I have a link in the description if you don't mind purchasing them through there, we get a little bit of a kickback. The kit that I bought basically has 4 rotors, pads all around, complete, front and rears. So yeah, it's a good deal, and we've been using them for about a month now, and the braking's never been better. She's real solid. So if you do need the brakes, they're in the description. I appreciate it if you purchase them. And it's a pretty straightforward procedure. You need a basic set of tools. I would recommend you jack the vehicle up the night before, get the tires off, spray all the slide pins and all the bolts down the night before, just like with some PB Blaster or whatever you got. It'll really make your life easier the next day. So this video is going to be aimed towards the absolute beginner that's never done anything with their vehicle. I'm going to show you how to loosen the lug nuts, jack the vehicle up, remove the tires, and kind of explain to you how the brakes work, just so you know why we're doing this. I think anybody can change their brakes. It's really not that hard. As long as you pay attention, you put it back the way it should be, you'll be safe. Okay. Another video I'm going to do later on is the rears, and also I'll end up bleeding the brakes as well, so look out for those videos. But yeah, for today, if you have any questions, feel free to leave them below, and yeah, let's get around to changing the pads and rotors on the Jeep Compass. Alright, so the key to not destroying your lock nut is just to take your time, really. This one's really dickered. Make sure you're really on there, especially guys using impact guns, you know. And only going a little bit, right? There we go. You're probably just looking at my butt, but it's always a good idea to situate yourself so you're pulling up. You have a lot more power pulling up, and then if you slip when you're pushing down, you could hurt yourself. If your wrench slips off of the nut. Just a little tip. Alright, so you want to position your jack as closest to the front of the wheel that you're lifting, but on the beefy part of the frame, okay? Now I know you can't see it right here, but I'm gonna just jack it up a little bit, and then I'll bring you underneath and show you where you hook onto. Now if you look right there, you can see that cross member goes all the way down, right? The frame rather. And then there's a beefy part right here, and I just go where the beefy part meets the frame. And just have an eye on everything as you're going up. Alright, so I've got a few inches underneath the tire. I'm going to set my jack up next to my jack stand up next to my jack. Bring it up as much as I can. Do that. There it is. Now I got the one side up pretty good, right? I got my jack extended to pretty much the highest settings. I want lots of room to work in here. Now I want to lower it, right? So you really want to be careful. You never really want to drop anything on here. So this jack's a little bit touchy, but as I'm rotating backwards, I'm kind of wiggling it. And I'll find a sweet spot for when the hydraulic wants to engage. There it is. I'm going ever so gently. And there we go. Watch the motorcycle. Alright, nice and easy. Now what I do is I'll actually keep the jack on the vehicle as well. So what I'll do is if I'm working over here, I'll just jack this up like a third jack stand, you know what I mean? Usually I'll just leave it on. Like I'll put the weight on the actual jack stand, of course, but I'll leave this one on. It's kind of like a safety. I'll just get the weight there a teeny bit. Alright, so the vehicle's in the air now. Let's rip the lug nuts off. Alright, so I'm going to use an impact driver because I have one, but if you don't, a regular old wrench will work because you've already broke the torque, right? Alright, another little tip too you can do for an extra safety is leave the tire underneath the vehicle a little bit. And then you'll have that much extra little bit of cushion in case both jacks fail. Probably unlikely, but you never know, right? Alright, it's the next morning, about 3:15. Pretty tired. I've actually recently kicked coffee completely. This is day 4, and it's weird. Anyways, ready to get after it here. So what I did after I sprayed all those suspension bolts down, I actually went ahead and sprayed the caliper mount bolts and the caliper the smaller bolts that let you access the brake pads. There's 4 bolts there. I'll show you when we get down there. I just thought, hell, I'm down here spraying anyways, I might as well spray those, and I just broke torque on this driver's side on all 4 of those bolts for the brakes, and they came off really easy, so I recommend you do the same, okay? So with that being said, let's get after it. Alright, so you'll have to forgive me, I got the shop heater just blaring. It's freezing rain outside right now, which is awesome. So here's the inside, the back side of the brake system, okay? So, you know, I don't know if you've done your brakes before or not. Probably not if you're watching this video, but I'll just quickly explain what happens if you're not familiar. And I'm not a mechanic. I know I'm not saying the proper terms, but essentially you press on this, your brake pedal, you increase hydraulic pressure in this line into this caliper. There's 2 pistons inside of this, this caliper that squeeze pads inside of here that make friction onto this this disc, okay? So what usually happens is, you know, over time, obviously, your pads wear down, and then it takes more and more hydraulic pressure to make that contact tighter, right? So the reason I'm changing these brakes and rotors is because when my wife brakes, the steering wheel really starts to get violent. Like it starts to wobble all over the place, and that's a big symptom is a warped rotor. So that can happen from the rotors getting super hot and then driving in the rain, and water gets on the rotors when they're super hot and then they warp. That's, from my understanding, the #1 reason. So I'm just going ahead, I'm changing all the rotors and all the pads. I got a kit. It was pretty cheap on Amazon, so that's my reasoning for doing it. These pads, I just had a quick little look at them. They're not that bad. They're still kind of beefy. For me, it's like, you know, I'm not going to put used pads on brand new rotors. I'm just going to change them all. So that's up to you what you want to do. There is a mil spec on how much you should have. When you change your pads and you increase that thickness of material, your brake pedal should come back a little bit more. There shouldn't be as much travel because there's more material, so you're going to hit the disc faster. So I'm going to end up in a separate video bleeding the brakes completely. But anyways, let's get back to this. So there's 4 bolts to get this unit apart. Okay, there's 2 14 mil, I think there, yeah, 14 mil slide bolts here. Okay, and they hold the back side of this caliper on. Okay, and they're 14 mil. Like I said, if you spray these 2 bolts here the night before, I had really no issues taking them off. And then there's 2, I think it's 17, 18, 2 18 bolts right here. Okay, hopefully you guys can see that. So I'll point the camera down just a bit more. Yeah, right here, 2 18 bolts holding the caliper to the hub. Okay, the hub flange. Well, I guess it's the back plate, but either way, so these got to come out as well. But for right now, let's remove these 2 14 mil bolts. And I also have my wire ready. Okay, so I had an old piece of electrical wire hanging around. I just wrapped it around the strut up here, you know, that coil over spring. So I got something to hang the brake lines off, because I don't want these getting all twisted and kinked, right? It's a little bit of weight on these vehicles. So let's go ahead, we'll loosen those off. So I've already broke the torque on mine. Another thing you're going to want to have handy, I've already sprayed it down, is some brake parts cleaner. Okay, because brake dust is like really bad for your lungs. I'm sure you've heard that 1,000 times, but you really shouldn't use compressed air and blow it all over the shop. Lots of guys do that, but you want to get it basically get it stuck in the liquid and then just let it more or less fall off the vehicle. Okay, so once you do that, you got your caliper here. You're just going to pull it off nice and easy. Like I said, try not to kink your wire too much. Stick that tail up there. Alright, so there we have the caliper out of the way. Here's my pads, and they just basically sit inside of the caliper mount, which is bolted to the hub flange, and the wheel spins. The wheel spins through this mount, right? And the pads are fixed. We'll go ahead, we'll pull these out. Also, try not to spray the camera with brake parts cleaner. It's not good for it, FYI. So take a screwdriver, you're just going to lightly pry these brake pads off. Okay, there's these clips that keep the pads in place. Wiggle those pads off. There's 1, 2. Okay, I got a big rock in mine, so that's probably maybe what done it too. Okay, so there's the pads off. So at this point, if you were just changing pads, you would just slide your pad, you'd clean everything. Oh, you clean everything, and then you would just slide your pads back in there. Okay, but I'm going to be changing the rotors, so we'll go ahead and we'll keep going with that. Okay, there's 2 clips that hold the pads onto the bracket here. So you're just going to want to take those off. They pretty much only go on one way, so don't worry about that. Now the next step is to remove this mounting bracket so that we can take the rotor off, right? So that's going to be the 18 mil, and I've already loosened mine off. But you're going to remember when you're taking these bolts off, and there is a bit of torque on these bad girls. You want to be pulling up, okay? Don't be pushing down. Pull up, keep your back straight, use your legs, kind of like you're at the gym, you know. As silly as that sounds, you know, you can definitely get hurt trying to rip these things off. If they're super rusty, like, you're gonna have issues for sure. Might have to get a open wrench for this one here. Now, if your bolts are super rusty, what you can do, I've done this sometimes, is just take a little wire brush bit on a drill. Just work around the nut and try to break some of that rust off so you can get the get the tool on, because every now and then you get pretty much a circular nut and you're in trouble. Being stubborn. And you want to kind of support the weight as you rotate it. Now I'm really lucky. I can see my rotors already coming off the hub, which is like indicates to me that somebody has been in here not too long ago. Now there's your piece that comes off, right? Here's the other bolt, and keep that right with it. Now, usually this hub is pretty much the rotor seized onto the hub, and then you got to take a hammer and start tapping the hub face here to break it loose, because there's a whole pile of rust down in here. Typically, for me, I mean, obviously, when we bought this Jeep about 3 years ago, he said there were brand new brakes on. I didn't expect to have good rotors. But obviously things have changed since then. Now when you take this rotor off, just like I did, you know, don't smash it around. There's a ton of dust in here, okay? You might as well spray the inside of this right now. Alright, I just wanted to show you guys the front side here. So, you know, I got my new rotors, my new pads. They're quite a bit beefier than the old ones. So I can see why I had such a spongy pedal. So now what I always do, and obviously the guy who put these on did it as well, is, you know, you want to clean this hub face, because this is where the rotor mounts onto. Clean all around here with a wire brush. Wipe it all down, and then you're going to want to take some grease, and you're going to want to put a light film on this face here where the rotor mounts on, so that you have a less chance of forming that little bit of rust. In case you don't do your brakes for like a long time, you know, say the vehicle sits or whatever, you don't want to have to take a hammer to these rotors and try to smash them off. So it's a really good idea to mount up or lube up this little face here, okay? So that's what I'm going to do now. Alright, so you got your new rotor. Now I have disc brakes on the front and the back, right? So some of these models have drum brakes on the back, and in that case this video won't be much help for you in the rear end. But if you got disc brakes all around, keep watching. So here's my grease. Reason for saying that is I'm going to apply it on the rotor side so that I don't put grease on my studs. So I don't want any lubrication on my studs, because that's what's holding my wheel on. And it should be tight on there. I don't want it loose. You can kind of coat the inside wall too, or nice to have a rag around too when you start getting into the grease. Now try not to get any grease on your rotor, right? Obviously you don't want grease on something that is supposed to be stopping you from getting in an accident. Alright, now that's on there, okay? Next step is we got to put the mounting plate back on. Slide that back on, and then remember the mounting bolts go through the knuckle here. Try to catch that bolt. I got like 10 different lights in my eyes. Alright, so that one's hanging there, so now I'll get my other bolt going. These bolts are really important, okay? They're obviously bigger bolts, 18 mil. Anytime you got 18 mil bolts or something like that, they're pretty mission critical. So you're going to want to put some torque on these bad girls. So the torque specs that I found for these bolts is 80 pounds, okay? I have a little 3/8 torque wrench, I think goes up to 90 pounds, so I've got it just about maxed out. If I recall, a regular 1/2-inch torque wrench will fit in here. I've got my wrench. Now you can pick these up at like a Harbor Freight or a Princess Auto or whatever, but they're pretty straightforward if you've never used them. There's a locking nut on the back side, okay? So first you want to loosen this all the way to the left, and then rotate the handle to where you got to be. So we need 80 pounds. And it goes in 5-pound increments. That's what the 1 to 5 is on this, okay? And at 80, I want to be at 0. That means I'm at 80. Because if I was at 80 and then 1, I'd be at 81, obviously. So, I don't know if you've never used a torque wrench before, but there's a little tip. So now I'm flush with the 80 mark at 0, so that's good. And then I want to take this and I want to lock it, and I want to put a little bit of pressure on it, because if that pops open, you could inadvertently change the torque setting when you're removing the wrench, and that has happened before for sure. Now, I know I said you could switch this around. Right now I'm pushing down on it. Just gotta watch yourself, okay? There it is, 80 pounds. All right, so rotor's gonna sit there. If you're having a hard time with your rotor moving on you and you're getting frustrated, take one of the lug nuts, okay? Put it on the bottom, thread it on, and that'll keep the rotor from moving on you while you're trying to get your pads on in the next step here, okay? So what you're gonna have to get now is your vice grips, and we're gonna have to compress that, compress the piston here. You can see the piston on the inside of the caliper. Mine's kind of compressed anyhow, just a single on these, and I'm gonna just lightly squeeze it, okay? I don't want to damage anything. Nice and easy. Now the reason we're doing this is because our brand new pads have so much material that we want to make sure we can get our new pads on the rotors. There we go. Alright, so now my piston bolt's flush with the caliper mount there, so I know I got basically the maximum amount of room that I need. I can go ahead and put my clips back in, but before I do that, I want to just take a bit of sandpaper or something and just try to clean out the inside of this area here, or at least spray it down and wipe it. Because basically that's where the pads are going to be rubbing on. As you come off the brakes, the pads pressure comes off, and then they kind of just sit there next to the rotor, and you want them to basically freely come off of the rotor so they're not stuck on there, and those little slides are kind of what do that. So you want to just give those a little clean up, so I'm going to do that now. Alright, so I'm just tinkering with this a little bit, but you know, you may have to loosen that nut, because I basically had my rotor too far to one side and my clip wouldn't go in, so I was having a hell of a time. So I just loosened this off so the rotor's kind of floating there freely, but it's not like real sloppy. I cleaned up my my clips, and now what I would recommend you do is also apply a teeny bit of grease. And do not get this on the rotor. You can actually just put it right on the inside of this shoe, or the this brake pad here, just the teeniest little bit. That'll help it slide in these pins, okay? Make sure you got your rag. Alright, they only go in one way, so. Alright, push it in like that. Same thing to the other side. Alright, and sandwich those together. See how tight everything is when it's all brand new. And now we're ready to put our caliper back onto the mounting bolt bracket here, okay? So we'll undo our wire, and you should be able to slide that right over the pads and get that. You may have to push those little rubber grommets in just a smidge. Try not to rip those, okay? Now, that should kind of just stay on there like that, but be careful. The last little step to get these changed is to clean these slides, okay? These slide pins. You're going to want to spray those down. Mine are actually in really good condition still, so I'm just going to wipe them. Going to wipe them down and then re-grease them, okay? Now I think these were set up for like 25 pounds or so. Get a couple turns to get it going. I'll stick my head right in here for this one. Let me get the torque wrench set up and we'll put some pounds on those. Alright, I was just looking up the torque specs for these guide pins, and I forgot to mention, like, one of the pins is different. If you notice, one of them has like a black little kind of like a shoulder on it, and that has to go back in the top one. Okay, you see that there? It's got a little black just, I don't know, something to do with something. It says right in the manual to make sure that gets put back up top. So these get about 32 pounds on them. Not much for 35 pounds, right? If you're doing this by hand, you don't really want to go too hard on those. Okay? Alright, that's it. Make sure you get your wire from above. And that's the front's done, okay? And then take your lug nut off the bottom, obviously, so you can put your tire back on. Alright, last thing I forgot to mention, when you're all said and done, and you've got your slide bolts torqued on, just hit everything with a little bit of brake cleaner again, okay? In the middle, back in there. You don't want any debris on the pads and the rotors when you're trying to break it in for the first time, you know? Can you imagine if you had like the teeniest little piece of rust or a rock or something jammed in there from, you know, your gloves or whatever, and then you start working in, and then right away you've pretty much screwed yourself. So keep it all clean, put the wheel back on. I'll show you that in a minute here. I'm going to run to the other side and quickly bang off the other side.